Welcome to another program of the Monroe County History Club. Welcome to my beautiful wife, Paulette. I got a cousin and a brother back there. I know that. So, you know, we got family participation here. And now I'm coming across loud to everybody, way back yonder. We've got a new speaker hookup today, so things are hooked up a little bit different, but it seems to be working well. Many thanks to the American Legion for letting us host these things for the past over 10 years. And also thanks to the wait staff, Brooke and the others, for helping us so much here, like they always do. Please be generous with them. I'd like to thank Catch TV. They've been recording these programs for over 7 years. And I might add, we have over 80 of these on YouTube, going back to 2015. So if you ever want to look at it, all you got to do is get on YouTube search engine, type in Monroe County History Club, and they all pop up. And there's some real good ones going back there. Yeah, you know, the idea here is to preserve as much local history as possible, and CATS really allows us to do just that. There are, in fact, several local history-related organizations in town, and we all try to support and work with each other to preserve our history. Besides the History Club, there are the Monroe County History Center, of which I've been a board member for a couple of years, Monroe County Public Library, IU Photo Archives, Catch TV, Wiley House Museum, and others. Also, our local history enthusiasts who attend and watch our programs are very much appreciated. The programs we present here are so diverse with many subjects. We've had history of Stone Mills Quarries of the area, RCA, Showers Brothers, history of local post offices, history of Hoosier Hysteria, old photos from the HT, barns, city parks. And here's what spell check did to me. I had Monon Railroad written down, and it came out the Mormon Railroad, but we know that's not right. Even about West Baden. So if you want to get on a regular email list, let me know, and I can send your email to George to get on our direct list. And by the way, George, sorry he can't attend. Hopefully he can make the next one. So for right now, Daniel Slagle, the director of the History Center, has a couple of words here.
All right, good afternoon, everybody. I'm really excited about Jim Capshew's presentation today, and it's actually thanks to Jim we have copies of his book about Herman B Wells. We only have 8 copies, so if you'd like one, please stop by and see us. And a lot of the other presentations that Michael mentioned, we have some of those books. So I brought the RCA book and Showers Brothers. There was Covered Bridges as well. I know that was a very popular subject here as well. And then the other thing I just want to make sure everyone is aware of is we have a new exhibit going up on July 18th about newspapers. So if you've been upstairs on the 2nd floor of the History Center, when you get off the elevator or you step off the staircase, that entire hallway from one end of the building to the other, it's 3 galleries, will all be about newspapers. So there's going to be a really, really big exhibit. I've already spoken to several people today that have worked for the HT, so make sure you stop by and see it. We're going to have a lot of neat things going on for that exhibit. So it starts July 18th, and it will run through the end of December, through the end of the year. So we'll have a lot of activities, presentations. We have a panel with some people like Bob Hamill that will be on it talking, so make sure to swing by and see us for that. And then otherwise, enjoy the presentation and make sure you come by and see us. I'll just be down here to my left, to your right, with a whole bunch of great books. So thank you, everyone. That's right. Thank you. Sorry, I almost forgot. Thanks to Michael, he keeps me honest and on task here. The History Center will be doing the presentation in August. We're going to talk about the history of the property where we are, some of the other things it has been used for, and then also broach into what museums do and what we're doing to get out and into the community, because we really want to collect as much history as we can, and we've got some great stuff. And like Michael said, he's a board member. Looking in the crowd here, I see a handful of other faces that are current or recent board members, so we really appreciate everyone's time for volunteering their time and expertise on our board. and for everyone that visits. But we're hoping to have a lot of fun with that August presentation. Thank you, Michael.
Thanks, Daniel. Now, our next month's program is by Christine Friesel of the Monroe County Public Library. And she's given several programs here before, and she's going to mention a little bit about her program here on July 25th.
Thanks, Mike. I'm looking forward to talking to you next month about MOCO Gilded. It's mapping Monroe County in the Gilded Age. The Gilded Age was 1870s to 1890s. And for all of us who do genealogy, the 1890 census, most of us know, most of it burned in a fire. So when you're doing genealogy, you go to 1890, sometimes you lose your people. And as a librarian, we're always looking for finding aids where we can help people get over that burden or that brick wall. But this time we're going to try to create a map so that when we are driving around Monroe County, we can pin down where something happened or who lived there. It's an ambitious project, but this is just a taste of what happened in the Gilded Age and where it happened. So we're more focused on where things happened and how to pin things down so we don't lose it again. Again, just developing a finding aid that's fun for everybody, whether you had ancestors in Monroe County or just are here for 2 years while you're going to school. At least you know who lived in your house or what happened on the corner where you live. Looking forward to it.
Thanks, Christine. Well, we've got July and August out of the way. There you have a short dissertation on that. And then, okay, so our next after that would be September 26th. Dr. Clay Stuckey, who's here, a good friend of mine, is going to give a program on the brief history of Bloomington High School campus. We're talking about the old BHS, the real BHS. The campus of the old high school. He's going to show many images, and it'll be the 59th anniversary of our class that year. Hopefully some of them will come here and listen to this fine program. October 31st, Rod Spaw is going to give a program on the Bloomington's Feltus family, printers, politicians, actors, and circus. That's his title for it. November 28th, Duncan Campbell, who's given several programs here before, will give a program called The Indiana Barn in Transition. January 2nd is open for now. I hope to get that closed soon. January 30th, Dr. John Butler, who's been here several times too, gives a program called Depots, Platforms, and Flag Stops, a history of the railroad places in Monroe County. And February 27th, Jill Vance will give a program called To Build a Reservoir, the origin of Monroe Lake. That brings us to today. This program has been on my wish list for quite a while, but Jim Capshew just is a busy guy. It took us only about a couple of years to get him on there to do this program on Herman B Wells. He's the lead historian at Indiana University, or the official historian at Indiana University. So anyway, this should be a great program, and so Jim, it's up to you.
There we go. Sorry about the technical problems. Can you guys hear me okay? Is this, no? Okay, how about here? Is this better? Okay, like this. How about this? Okay. And that's what I looked like as a young man. Yes. When I wrote the book 11 years ago when it got published. So that's me and Herman Wells in the main library. So I'm going to talk about Dr. Wells from both of my experiences with him as a student, but also as a historian. And so I'm going to start with how I got interested in this project to document the life story of Herman B. Wells. And so I started when I was as an undergraduate in 1977. I was working way through school and was looking for a part-time job. And back in the day, you would go to the Office of Student Services, the financial aid office, and they would have 3x5 cards with description of a job and a phone number. So I went to there, and one of the cards said, "Houseman wanted. Call this number." So I called that number, talked to Dottie Collins, who was Herman Wells' research assistant, and it turns out it was like for a residential houseman job for Dr. Wells. He lived at 1320 East 10th Street, right across the street from the main library, now the Wells Library. And so I interviewed him, with him, and then interviewed at the house. And so one of the stories that I tell is that when I first met him, who I didn't know him before that. I knew that he was a famous guy and a big guy at IU. But when I went into his office, and he was a chancellor at that point. He was had been president until 1962, but this was 1977. So he was 75 years old. And I went into his office, and he had a big desk, and he was trying to get up from his chair. And so I reached out my hand to shake his hand, and he gripped my hand and pulled himself out of the chair. And I didn't think much about it, but in some ways, that was an introduction that he was a guy who didn't care about, well, I needed help to get out of the chair, and okay, I can help him, right? So he invited me into that Wells circle. So this is a time when the very famous photograph of him walking across campus in 1977 with from his office to his house, or from his house to his office across campus. And he had a cane, he had the boater hat, and a pedometer right there. And so he did that for exercise, right? But he also had a great picture that kind of symbolized the time that I knew him as a student. This is a picture of me as a student resting in his cousin's house. We went up to Jamestown, Indiana, where he was born. He had two cousins, Esther and Helen Hetty. Both of them were unmarried. Herman Wells was unmarried. And so we would visit there. And we actually, when I worked for him, he liked to drive a little bit still. And he had a giant Oldsmobile 88. He could barely see over the hood, but he drove us up there, and he was like a pretty fast driver. And we didn't go up on the main highway. We went on Indiana 39, which is going through Monrovia and other little tiny towns and stuff. And he said, well, let's turn off the air conditioning because it's nice. It's a big warm day, and he just started telling me about, there's a little store over here, or there's a good restaurant somewhere else, and he never looked at the road. He was just talking to me. And I was kind of worried that this guy, is he going to get into an accident or something like that? But we made it up there and had a nice time with Esther and Helen. And then on the way back, he said, well, why don't you go ahead and drive, because I need to work a little bit. So he worked in the car. He had a dictaphone. And he said, well, we need to get back to the campus, so just step on it. And so we were on 465, and so I was going, 75 miles an hour or whatever, and the state police came by, or came, and we pulled over, and Dr. Wells said, why do we stop? I said, well, the police car, indicated to stop. He said, well, take care of it quickly and we'll get on our way. So anyway, so then the trooper came and he looked in the car and said, oh, hi, Dr. Wells. And so he did give me a ticket. But Wells took care of it, which is good. So then this is just a sort of a general introduction of where I'm coming from. So then this is a picture that's been reproduced quite frequently, and you see me in the middle of the crowd there behind him. This was his 76th birthday in the summer of 1978, and you notice the office staff and the house staff. A couple of African Americans, Mary Jo Chandler and Matilda Hopkins, who were the housekeeper and the cook. And so this is a nice little photograph. But I didn't have, back in the day, we didn't really have pictures all the time. Right now, everybody's got too many pictures of anything and everything. So so this is a picture of Mary Jo Chandler, and then at the end of my term, 2 years at IU, when I was a senior, the Arbutus interviewed me and had a photographer to document my unusual roommate. And so it was in the Arbutus. It's hard to see, but basically it was one of the things I did was have dinner with him every night when he was at the house, and it was great. We talked about anything and everything. He was very interested in my progress. I was a psychology major, and I got interested in the history of psychology. And his predecessor, William O'Brien, started the psychology department back in 1888, and so we had a lot of interesting talks about Brian and his career and what he did for IU. And so this is my sort of it was a very academic atmosphere in the house. And it was great to be with him throughout the days and the years. So then fast forward here, I went over to graduate school at the University of Pennsylvania in Philadelphia, and got my PhD in the 90s, or in the 80s, sorry, and then got hired back at IU in 1990. And so I started talking to Dr. Wells and said, well, somebody's going to write a biography of you, right? And so why don't I do that? And he said, well, do you really want to do that? Isn't there something better to do with your time? And he was very supportive of the idea of that, but he never wanted to have an official authorized biography. He said, you have access to anything and everything just like everybody else does, right? But he really wanted to, he understood that it's important to have documentation of leaders and their actions. But he never failed to say, isn't there something better to do with your time? So it took me a long time to do the biography, well over 10 years. But anyway, so that was enough blessing for me to undertake this thing. So I started working on it, and I decided that Wells's life can be divided up in 3 different areas, from his birth in 1902 to the presidency in 1937, so 35 years. And then the presidency occurred for 25 years. He was president for 25 years. And then he was the university chancellor, the first university chancellor, for 38 years until his death in the year 2000. So he lived to be 97. He was born on June 7th, 1902. exactly the same year that both of my grandparents had been born. So I want to just do a little show about some of the things he's done and the documentation that is around. That then some things you've probably seen, but I'll start with his upbringing and his life before IU. So this is the first slide. It's Herman was like 2.5 years old at that point. And this is he lived in Jamestown, Indiana, a village of 600 people. So this was his first day at school when he was 6. He's a pretty happy guy here. And then this is a picture of him hunting crawdads when he was 10 years old. So he lived in town, but he had access to a garden, and he would take a pony and a cart to town and stuff like that to help with his mom and stuff. And so he was a very good boy. He was also very popular in high school. He was a good student, well liked, but also academically superior. And so he was voted the best all-around boy in high school by his senior class peers. And this is a picture of him as a senior. But when he was a sophomore, he had a physical problem. He had mumps when he was a sophomore, and he had a kind of it's a complication of mumps where the testicles is called orchitis, where the testicles swell up and are quite painful, and at that point people thought that it made you infertile. And so that was something that was kind of, I think, hard for him as a young man. And there's no evidence that I found that he ever dated at all. Okay, he was very popular in school. Everybody was good friends with with Herman, but he also was a great. His dad worked for the bank, and so he was very interested in banking and business and things, and so he in high school he was able to figure out many money-making schemes for class projects and so forth, and so he was like he was very much a people person and very helpful to a lot of people, and so I sort of prefigured some of his work here at Indiana University. So then he first went to school at the University of Illinois. Illinois had a pretty big business school at that point. IU had just started a business school in 1920 when he graduated from high school, but the Champaign-Urbana campus was less than 100 miles away in Illinois, and so there's a direct train route to that campus. But he went there, and he wasn't very happy. It was kind of a bigger place. There was a lot of students from Chicago, and he didn't really like it too much. He did fairly well, and he sent a letter to the registrar at IU and asked to transfer. And so he transferred in 1921 to IU. He had more friends and more acquaintances that were here at Indiana at that point. And so this is the picture of the campus at the time. Okay, this is on the lower left is the new library. It was now it's called Franklin Hall, but it's right there at the entrance to the campus, and then the old Crescent basic buildings are there, and you can see the Dunn's Woods in the center of that, and then beyond that you can see, you know, the countryside of Bloomington. Okay, it was a very small town, and so the campus was, you know, 20 acres when it started, and by the time he was a student, there's probably 100 acres of campus at the time. You can see on the lower right, you can see the Kirkwood Observatory, and so this was the campus in the woods here. Then this is also an alumni advertisement. The great Hoosier State offers you Indiana University. It shows all the campus buildings there, in the spirit of Indiana's hands. The mother of college presidents. IU had been getting a reputation because several college presidents around the country had been trained at IU, and that was one of the things that people were noting at that time. And it was also the oldest of the Western state universities back when the Old Northwest was the West. This is another view of the campus, a drawing when they were contemplating the field house next to the men's gymnasium in the center of the picture. And so you can see the old Crescent around the Dunn's Woods, and then they crossed what was the Jordan River, the campus river, and on 7th Street, the men's gymnasium that was built in 1916, and then they were talking about a field house, which is still there, the Garrett Field House now. And so this was the campus that he saw, that he lived. He loved IU. He was a Sigma Nu member. He was the president of the fraternity when he was a senior. That building is still there. It's at the corner of Kirkwood and Grant Street. Okay, it's the where a lot of the little businesses and the Soma Coffee House and the Laughing Planet and some other businesses. And so this was a private residence that had been converted into a fraternity. The Psi Phi's, I think, had it before Sigma Nus, but the Sigma Nus were there in the 1920s. And so Wells was very interested in fraternity life. He didn't have brothers or sisters, so he collected people. He collected friends and acquaintances, and he was a very proud member of the fraternity. He also was able to do some of his banking and skills, where he bought a big armoire and kept the tuxes that for dances and stuff like that. People had tuxes and they needed a place to store them, and so then he would charge rent, right? And so then basically he would say, well, you know, a dance is coming up, and so the guy said, well, I need my tux. And he said, well, not until you pay me, okay? And so he was he was very much interested in business and banking, but he was very socially adept. He had a certain way about him. A very friendly guy, a very understanding guy. Loved to have humor and jokes and things like that. And he didn't do as well as he did in high school academically, but he was a decent student. So here's a picture of it says "not married." This is Wells on the left. So that was I think a very formative time in his life. One of the advisors to the fraternity was Ward Biddle, who was the director of the bookstore at IU. He was about 10 years older than Dr. Wells, and he became a trusted confidant and sounding board. And so they struck up a really good friendship. Ward Biddle then became the treasurer of IU in his administration. But let's not get ahead of our story here. So this is he was also interested in music as a child. He was there was a Jamestown band and things like that, a community band, and so he went to the IU band, and so he played the baritone, and so then he lost it when he was a senior, and this is a one ad saying, you know, I lost my horn, and so in the last couple months, and I'm not sure. He never got it back actually. But the thing that he did for the band, he was much more involved in the fundraising aspect of that, right? And so he was very much involved in getting money for special events and dances and things like that. He also was doing some fundraising for the fraternity. They were renovating their bathroom facilities and things like that. And so he went around to the alumni of the Sigma News to get money for that kind of rehabilitation. And so he graduated in 1924 with a BS in Commerce. At that point, it was the School of Commerce and Finance. And then he went back to Lebanon and worked for his father's bank, or the bank that his father worked at. It wasn't his father's bank. It was the one he worked at. And so he was living at home and trying to figure out what to do, like a lot of students do. And he also took a couple of classes. Back in that time, the Extension Division had a standing offer to communities to, if you had, I don't know, something like 20 people to petition IU for a course, they would send a professor for 2 weeks and do a short course on any kind of college subject, which is quite interesting, right? This is sort of the beginning of the Extension Division, and then the regional campuses that evolved after that. But so he took a couple courses, and then he decided to go back to IU to get a master's degree in economics. His parents thought that he was doing a law degree, but turns out he was doing a master's in economics. And so then it took him just a year. And this is a picture of him with his fraternity brothers as a grad student, okay? And he's there, look at with the dog next to the guy with the 1930 sweater on. So he went back to IU, still talking to Ward Biddle and trying to figure out again what to do. And so then this is a very interesting time of his life. He then, after that, he was a really good student and got an offer to go to the University of Wisconsin, which is a very famous faculty at that time in social science. And so he got a fellowship to go to the University of Wisconsin to do a PhD. So he went there in 1927 and for that year. That's when he grew the mustache, because he was only like, you know, a couple years older than the undergraduates and stuff like that, and so he needed to appear a little bit more distinguished, I guess, as a younger instructor. And so Wells then got a really interesting job offer when he was a grad student to come back to Indiana to become the field secretary of the Indiana Bankers Association, which is, you know, the premier banking association in Indiana. Indiana had very lax banking laws. They had 1,100 banks in the state. 1,100 banks. We have 92 counties, right? So more than 10 banks every county. And some of these counties are tiny little counties, right? And so basically, you and I could just start a bank. You know, you didn't have to have, you know, money or anything like that. You say, well, we're going to start a bank. And so what he did, I'm going a little beyond here, but his master's thesis was about service charges for small town banks in Indiana. And so it's clear that there was problems with the banking industry in Indiana. That's exactly when Indiana had a recession because of the farming business early on, before the Great Recession in 1929. And so things are moving along that pathway where it's like, okay, we need to figure out a way to deal with the banks in Indiana and to make it more viable. And so the IBA, the Indiana Bankers Association, started a field secretary. So he went around to every county in the state to meet with banking officials. Okay, so think about that. How he was able to sort of talk to people about their banks and figure out ways to sort of make it better. And you know, the banking people are people who are the economic elite of the communities. And so he was able to sort of get to know a lot of people like that. He also then got a car, right? So this is back early, you know, in the 20s where cars were getting to be really much more common. His parents didn't have a car, right? But he had a car, so for his job. And so we've got kind of the confluence of a lot of different things that are going on. And so by 1929, when he was working for the banking association, the Great Depression hit. And so then he was in a position then, so he was also keeping in touch with his professors at IU and Ward Biddle, because he really wanted to come back to IU. And so he got a job as an instructor in 1930 at IU, teaching economics and business. And so, and also in that point, he was also kind of being the expert on Indiana banking regulations. And so the state government put in a study commission. He was the research director for the study commission on the future of Indiana banking regulations. And so when Paul McNutt became the governor in 1932, he was in a position then to help reform the banking laws. And so Wells's expertise was really important, and he basically was the architect of this legislation that was passed in 1933 to address the problems with Indiana banking laws. And so Indiana was known early on as a national leader in the reform of banking laws. And so Wells had some notoriety outside of Indiana also. And so then he was on leave at IU doing all this stuff for the state, and so then he became the chief bank examiner of the state and secretary to the Department of Financial Institutions, and he had like 2 or 3 different jobs, full-time jobs for the state. So he was a very busy man at that point. He was living in Bloomington. He was living up in Indianapolis, but he did have some time to come back to IU and participate in the Book Nook mock commencements. The Book Nook mock commencements, there were 4 of them from 1927 to 1931. Basically, the Book Nook was, famously where Hoagy Carmichael composed Stardust back in that period. But it was also a time where people were like having a nice, like making fun of the university and stuff like that. And so there's some great. I wish somebody could do some research on the Book mock commencements, because it was just sounds like it was a riot. But what they did, they did these mock diplomas. So this is the Book Nook hereby confers upon Herman Wells, who's completed Doctor of Mythology, Faculty Supervisor Emeritus. Okay, so it was just a lot of fun. And so, but there's a great picture of him on the podium receiving this degree. But it's like it was on right across the street from the campus. So anyway, so the point is, Wells was very much in the thick of things with the Indiana banking reform legislation, and then so he was teaching a little bit in between times. So this is a neat little quote here. If our pioneer ancestors did not like a given situation, they set out to change it. We have been too prone these past few years to feel that unfit economic situations could not be solved. Too many of us have lost the pioneer spirit. We need to regain it to use in fearless experimentation with agencies of social control designed to curb the abuses and the undesirable features of the capitalistic system. Okay, this is 1933. Okay, so this is the time where things are really dire, both nationally and locally and in the state. And so Wells was very much about trying to understand and solve these kinds of problems. So then William O'Brien, who knew Wells, I should say, the Dr. Wells, he never got a earned PhD. Okay, he had 26 honorary doctorates, right? And so people started calling him Dr. Wells back in the 40s when he got several honorary degrees and stuff like that. So just a side note here. So anyway, so here he is. William O'Brien basically said, well, Herman, come back and to become the dean of the School of Business Administration, which is the new name for the School of Commerce and Finance. And so he came back to IU in 1935 and was the dean. So he had been an instructor and an assistant professor for 5 years, and 3 of those were on leave. So, really experienced guy, right? But he knew his stuff. And so then one of his first communications to the students were about my door will always be open for you to discussion of any of your problems. This is for the students. I'm sure I may say the same thing for each of the other members of our faculty. Come to us frequently. We wish to know each of you personally and to share with you your experiences and problems. Okay, 1935. So again, this is like open door policy, trying to, be a part of a community, an academic community. So this is part of sort of his style. And so then he was the dean for 2 years, and then William O'Brien retired kind of suddenly in 1937. It took the trustees completely by surprise. They only knew William O'Brien as president. They hadn't had a search for 35 years. He became president in 1902, okay, same year that Dr. Wells was born. And so they were kind of trying to figure out, okay, how do we get a president? What do we do? And so, they basically they basically said, well, let's have Herman Wells to become the acting president. And so this is a quote from Wildermuth, who was the vice president of the trustees. Well, this is talking to Dr. Wells. Well, to be perfectly frank with you, the reason we don't want you to take one of the other men is that we might want him for the president. We know we won't be considering you. We can make you acting president without prejudicing the choice of any of the others. Okay, so that's interesting, right? I mean, so then at that point, IU had been working on a self-study, like looking at the university in all manner of direction here. And so and then Wells did such a great job as acting president for 9 months. They figured out, okay, well, we have our president right here. Okay, he's still a young guy, right? He's 35, but people really respected him and thought that he would be a good president. So this is him. Obviously, he's stage picture and stuff, but that's him as the newly installed president of IU in 1938. And so then, among the different gifts that he got were a bunch of flowers, because he knew the banking elite around the state, and so they sent flowers. And there's a great picture. I didn't bring it, but there's a great picture of him sitting with flowers all around, just sort of sheepishly, grinning and stuff. He also got a song composed in his honor by one of his band colleagues from the 1920s, who's now a professor of music, and this is Newell Long. And so this is a song that was actually performed, and it's be yourself, just be yourself from day to day. Be yourself, just be yourself. That's the Herman B Wells way. He avoids all ostentation, no pretense or affectation. He's a pleasant, humble, normal, friendly one. He assumes no pose to please. He has a natural poise and ease, genuine, sincere, and honest, loving fun. All these endear the man. Emulate him with, if you can. Be yourself, just be yourself. That's the Herman B Wells way. So that was performed by the faculty wives, both when he became president and then when he stepped down 25 years later. So there's actually a little 45 record that you can listen to. Anyway, then so he kept on doing the presidency thing, and so he got inaugurated about a year and a half after he started as acting president. And so people were, wondering, well, does he have the right values? He's a businessman, maybe he's not going to be exactly appropriate. But he came out very strongly, especially in his inaugural address, that the university cannot discharge any of its obligations to society in essence, it's first and foremost an institution dedicated to scholarship and scholarly objectives. Okay, that's really his bottom line, right? Then he quoted John Dewey, democracy has to be more in a new every generation, and education is the midwife. Okay, the idea that, and this is a time where storm clouds are gathering in Europe, right? We've got the authoritarian in Germany and Italy and other places. And then another thing that I always love this, authority must be derived from reason, not from position. So it doesn't matter whether you're the president or a janitor. You know, if you have a good reason, that's what the point is about the academic community. And so I think that's something too, that if there's good ideas, then he would support those ideas. And so basically, he was faced with a pretty interesting situation. A lot of the faculty were getting old and basically dying with their boots on because they didn't have a retirement system, right? And so finally, in 1937, the Carnegie Foundation established the Carnegie Teachers' Pensions. And that was, William O'Brien was like 77 or 76 or 77 when he retired, right? And so, so they were able to get people to actually, retire and have, a life, right? And so, but then there's some of the older faculty who didn't want to retire. So Wells was faced with like, okay, we need to like, smooth the way out and say, for the health of the institution. So basically, there was like probably, I think, 2/5 of the faculty had retired. So he had to get a bunch of faculty, okay? And the president's at that point, the fact he was part of the search committee, right? It wasn't like other people doing other things, but he was very much involved in that. He was going on trains and automobiles and airplanes to find faculty, and so that was one of his big jobs. During that period in the first 5 years. Of course, then the war started in 1941. And so that was a huge deal with trying to create this wartime university. And then a lot of the military units were training at IU. And so having to figure out how the physical plant can work. And so these are all the big problems and things that Wells was faced with almost immediately. So then in 1946, let's think about the campus in 1946. So this is on the bottom left is the old Crescent, right here. And then all these things here, these are trailers. These are all these trailers that were military surplus. There are also a bunch of barracks and other kinds of buildings that were military surplus because IU was faced with a giant increase in the student population. And so, sorry, I need to get my... I've been talking a long time already, so. So anyway, so IU was facing a huge increase in the student population. They moved from 5,000 students to 10,000 students in 1946. And so they had to delay the start of classes for 3 weeks to start getting the buildings and for classrooms and residence halls and stuff like that. And so this was like, growing pains, definitely. And so you can actually see some of the new stuff. This is the IU auditorium, right? and that's the field house that we talked about earlier. And then there's the Wells Quad, which is Agnes Wells Quad, the new School of Education, the Music Building, and then the row of academic buildings around the Old Crescent. And so that's the extent of the campus at that point. So a lot of things were happening after the war. Wells was very lucky because this is a time when higher education was expanding. The GI Bill funded that big, huge increase in military veterans to come to campus. And of course, they were very interested in bettering themselves, and they're much more mature and so forth. There's a lot of really interesting reports about that cohort of military veterans. There are also more money from state and federal agencies to support research and education in general. And so this is a nice time to be a president, right? You have problems with growth, but that's something to work with. So the faculty, right? So we got people like Albert Kinsey who got interested in sex research. He started a marriage course that was not a regular course, but it was sort of a special course. You had to be married or engaged to actually take the class. But then he started figuring out that, well, there's really not a whole lot of good information about sexual behavior. And so he was starting to interview students who were in that course about their sexual experience. Then they were volunteering all kinds of information and stuff. So he started working on this sort of research project as a consequence of the teaching. And so there was a lot of kind of pushback, right? And so Wells said, well, people are wondering what you're doing. And so he said, well, you need to decide whether you want to do the research or the teaching. And so Kinsey definitely was a researcher. He chose the research. He stopped teaching and doing a pretty major, actually the biggest research project to that date on the sexual behavior of both males and females. And so Wells was very supportive of that. But this is a picture of Dr. Kinsey on the left and George Corner, who was a NRC official, and Wells in the middle. This is the only picture of Kinsey and Wells that I'm aware of, which is interesting. There's a lot of pictures of other people and stuff. But he was very much a supporter of Kinsey, and he got federal funding and foundation funding for his pathbreaking research, and then and of course the Kinsey Institute is still around at IU, still celebrating. I guess they just have their 75th anniversary. Now it's called the Kinsey Institute. So this is part of the defense of the Kinsey Institute. The university believes that the human race has been able to make progress because individuals have been free to investigate all aspects of life. It further believes that only through scientific knowledge so gained can we find the cures for the emotional and social maladies of our society. In support of Dr. Kinsey's research, the university is proud to have as a co-sponsor the National Research Council. With the chairman of that committee, I agree in saying that we have large faith in the values of knowledge, little faith in ignorance. So Kinsey has been, a lightning rod over and over and over. In fact, that they were marked from the state legislature just quite recently. So anyway, so that's one of the key items there, that he was very much supportive of Albert Kinsey's freedom to do research. This is a picture of Dr. Wells and J.K. Lilly, who endowed the Lilly Library. And so the library system was greatly increased during Wells's tenure. This is a nice little thing. As ideas are the fruit of the university and scholars of the blood that give her life, so books are the university's sustenance. So that was something that he was able to get some philanthropy, basically. I mean, J.K. Lilly was a pretty great collector, but he also got a good tax write-off by giving it to the university in the late 50s. What I'm trying to get across, that Wells didn't do it all, but he hired people supported people like Kinsey, or hired people like the dean of the libraries, Robert Miller, who was a great dean, or Wilfred Bain, who was the dean of the School of Music. Okay, and so this was a picture of Dean Bain when they were breaking ground for the Musical Arts Center in 1968. But Dean Bain came in 1947, and he said, "Well, I'd love to come to IU. Can you support me in my dreams of an opera program?" Now, opera program, okay, it's a big ask, right? The idea that, but opera has all aspects of musical performance. You got the singers, you've got the instrumentalists, you've got stage design, you've got ballet, you've got dancing, you've got history, you've got musicology and all this kind of stuff. And so that was one that the idea that you start a music school that has an opera program, you can cover all the bases in the musical field. And so he selected certain areas to really focus in on making IU preeminent. So then in 1944, during the war, Wells did a layman's sermon at the First Methodist Church. He was a lifetime Methodist. So, and this is about race relations. Now, for the first of these, the renunciation of color, class, and race prejudice. Where? In England? In China or Palestine? No, we must renounce prejudice of color, class, and race in Bloomington, Monroe County, Indiana. Our renunciation must be personally influenced by deeds. Our actions will measure the sincerity of our words. So this is a pretty strong statement here. And he actually did some things to ease some of the race relations at IU. And among them was having Marian Anderson, who was the first African-American singer at the Metropolitan Opera Company, came to IU and sang in our new auditorium. Not just one time, not just two times, but three times in the 40s and 50s. Then the Indianapolis Recorder, the African-American newspaper in Indianapolis, had a little photo essay on African-American women at IU, students that they were doing well. Then you've got Thomas Atkins, who then became, he was the first African-American student body president. This is in 1960. He became a noted civil rights activist. And then this is John Preston Ward, who, this is Dr. Wells in, like, I think 1985 or something like that. Embracing him, he was also a leader. So Wells was really, in some fashion, he was trying to be make IU a very caring place, but also a really good place, a very excellent academically, but also socially and progressive in race relations. There was a lot of places where people, African American educators, could come to IU in the summertime to do advanced degrees because educational opportunities were not available in the South. And so Indiana University is the southernmost Big Ten institution, and so IU was able to accommodate those kinds of programs. So I can go on and on and on. I'm not going to, but there's a lot of detail in my book. So I want to go back a little bit further up here. So this is a very famous picture of him, sort of with the symbols of office. Okay, this is, I think, in 1961. He's standing in front of an open window with some greenery in the back. He's ringing the school bell. Well, the school bell connects him to his parents, who were both school teachers. Okay. And then he's got his other hand on the globe, which he calls the university's parish, right? So all the programs at IU in Bloomington can reach around to other places in the world, right? And we cover a lot of international aspects of education. And then the other element there is the Tibetan Beggar's Bowl. Okay, that's the little thing on up here, and that symbolizes his actual work, that he had to get the financial resources to do the educational activities of the university. So this is I think it's a beautiful evocation of his or symbolization of his job. So then I'm not going to be able to talk too much about this the internationalization of the university that occurred under Dr. Wells and is continuing to occur. But the idea that he was very interested in higher education other places. He was very much involved in rebuilding the German higher education system right after World War II. He was sort of the godfather of the Free University of Berlin in the late 40s. And there's another area here that he was very much involved in. The support of a great university is the most lasting of all investments. For universities to have a life of their own that maintains the validity and character of a gift. So he was the great fundraiser of Indiana University. He gave his whole estate, but he was also was because they did a little internal survey that basically said that in the 70s, and the idea that he was very much a believer and a salesman for the values of the university, and so this was something that then he became sort of the chief fundraiser in the IU Foundation. So I hadn't talked too much about the foundation, but philanthropy is another big area that he was well involved in that. Okay, so I've been talking for an hour now. So do I need to wrap up, or can I just? Okay, I'm almost done with my slides. See. Onwards and upwards. That's what Dr. Wells said. This is a kind of a pensive picture of him leaving office in 1962. He was 60 years old, okay? So he had 25 years of the presidency then, and then he could still go and do great things for the university. So this is the what was the main library. Now it's the Wells Library, and so I just like this picture. And for my, well, I shouldn't say that. So the library got the name on Wells, right? But I think they should have put Wells' name on the auditorium. That was his first building as president, and that really kind of was the centerpiece of the fine arts plaza and things like that. But we can talk about that later. So this is a picture of the campus in 1971, okay? So Wells bought about 1,700 acres of land, okay? So when he became president, it was 140 acres of land. When he retired, it was 1,800 acres, okay? So he was the big land buyer of the university. Now the campus is 2,000 acres. So the bulk of that was bought by Dr. Wells, okay? And this was a land bank for future expansion. We see this, it's still continuing, right? 50s, 75 years later. But I love this picture because you see the old crescent is right here, and now it's this giant northeast quadrant of Bloomington. And so that's part of the Wells legacy there. He wrote a autobiography, Being Lucky. Luck didn't have anything to do with it, right? He was a worker. He was very much involved in every aspect of the university's development. And so this was in 1980. In fact, when I was working for him as a houseboy, he was actually writing the book and stuff. And we had some interesting talks because he said, well, I didn't remember this way. But then, he had research assistants and who found documents and things like that. So it's interesting for him to sort of have to confront, his own historical record. And then he continued to be active and helping the university in all kinds of different ways. He was a great supporter. I remember, I think in 1996, the Dalai Lama came to IU and in the Assembly Hall, and so when Wells came out in a wheelchair, there was a huge standing ovation. And then the Dalai Lama came out, and it's like these guys were just like these great people, right? And it was really nice to see that his influence sort of spread beyond just Indiana, even the country, but really the whole world. And so then he died in the year 2000. So he made another century. This was the Indiana Daily Student. They had it happened during spring break. He died on March 18th, 2000, and then the funeral was on March 22nd in the First Methodist Church, exactly 62 years after he became president. The same day. So this is something I said in my book. Herman B Wells built an institution and in the process became one himself. Like a Hoosier Antaeus, the giant son of Gaia, Mother Earth, and Poseidon, the sea, from Greek mythology, Wells drew his prodigious strength from his connection to the Indiana soil. He planted so many seeds of compassion and kindness and learning that his memory will be everlastingly green as long as there remains an Indiana University. And so that's sort of like when I think about sort of like where did he get this, right? That he was a fifth generation Hoosier. He knew people. He understood the culture, but he also was able to elevate that culture tremendously. So then there's a lot of things that we did after Wells died, right? So we've got the Wells statue. You know, it was supposed to. It was being done when he was still alive, but then he died, and we dedicated it after that. So that's there on the campus. It's where the heart of the old campus, right? It's the campus that he knew as a student. So he had 79 years of association with Indiana University. Okay, so that's over a lifetime. Then you've got, this is a beautiful picture by Chris Meyer, an IU photographer, with the frost on his head, overlooking the Union Building. And then this is Joe Lee's little drawing, sort of with Wells at the corner there, but also the multicultural Bloomington with the courthouse. And you know, a lot of international students came, and some of them stayed, right? I mean, people. That's why we have this wonderful cosmopolitan culture and cuisine and things like that here in Bloomington. And Wells was indirectly responsible for some of that. And then this was my favorite picture of Wells, a portrait done when he was 90. It hangs in the Indiana Memorial Union. And so that's it for now, and I'm happy to answer questions and take comments. Clay.
Two questions. First, what does ND mean after the name?
No date.
Okay. Second question, bigger question. When he became chancellor, because of his reputation for probity, integrity, and wisdom, but he hung around as chancellor, was that a problem for subsequent presidents or boards of trustees or faculty who, if an idea came up by anybody, like a new president, there's always this, well, we'll run it by Herman and see what he thinks, you know?
He did not like to be deferred to. He thought that people, by defer to him, you know, personally, is sort of abdication of their responsibility as a member of the academic community. So he didn't like the deification that happened, you know, even when he was president, right? And so the university chancellor is really it was a new job because they had chancellors for each campus, right? The Bloomington chancellor, like Ken Gross Lewis was the Bloomington chancellor. And so the university chancellor was sort of this kind of a big, you know, open place where he could do things. He could be fundraising. He could sit in for, well, at some point, a couple of times he had to sit, you know, sort of like stand in for the president or, you know, that kind of stuff. But it's like, I don't think the president, I think the presidents since Wells, you know, really enjoyed that kind of, you know, back, you know, he had it, the back of the senior administrators and stuff like that. Now when later on they appointed Ken Gross Lewis as the university chancellor, and then they took that away from him, which I think that's kind of, I don't know. We don't see, I don't see Debbie Lemon here right now to talk about that, but yeah, so again, and of course now we have Michael McRobbie, the former president, now is the university chancellor. So this is an honorary designation, right? And so it just gives, you know, people freedom to define themselves, right? So, Michael?
Can you speak a little bit to the situation between Wells and Gables and George Tallaferro?
Oh yeah, that's been. I talked to George, and he told me about the the integration of gables, basically. So yeah, so George was a education student, I think, and he couldn't eat in the local restaurants. So he was at the School of Education, which is on 3rd and Eagleson, and he had to run back to his rooming house. It's good exercise, of course, right? And so basically he stopped in to Dr. Wells' office because he had open office hours, and said, I'm complaining. He's complaining that he couldn't, had to do all this running back and forth to get a lunch. So Wells said, well, let's call the owners of the gables and see if, and of course they say, well, we're not prejudiced, but some of our customers are, right? That's always the excuse. And so they said, well, let's have George and his date come in for a week and see how that goes. Okay, so, and this is all from George Taliaferro, and so that went off without a hitch. So then they tried George and his friend and their dates. Okay, and so then after that, it was Gables was well, that's the old book nook, basically, right? And so that was integrated. So that's sort of the short story of that, right? But then other places in Bloomington were not serving African Americans, and so. In the 50s, Wells sort of talked to the Restaurant Owners Association and said, well, we're thinking about maybe expanding campus dining facilities and having a closed campus, right? Okay, so basically economic blackmail, right? And so that sort of prompted them opening up a little bit more. But yeah, I'm sure it's a much more complicated picture, but that's sort of the basic things that, and of course, the local chapter of the NAACP gave Wells, when he retired from presidency, the Brotherhood Award, right? That he really was helping that community to have equal access to facilities and things. But yeah.
Jim, did you ever see or hear of Herman Wells getting angry?
Well, not directly, but apparently when he was out of town, when Mayor Lemon cut down all the trees on Kirkwood in 1961 with no public input. He was angry about that. And of course it's still, I mean, it's still kind of, nude on Kirkwood, right? I mean, they used to have, two less lanes of traffic and a big tree flots, right? And we haven't really recovered from that, right? So that kind of stuff made him angry. But as far as personal anger towards a person, I never saw that. Yeah.